Welcome back to the Week 10 Waiver Wire video ad. We've got the most important guys to add, as well as some deep stashes that you need to know about. So let's get it going with our quarterback, Marcus Mariota from the Atlanta Falcons. He's had a little up and down rough last few weeks, but he's still been a fantasy producer, a guy that you want to have on your roster because he's getting you those rushing yards and he's getting you a little bit through the air as well. Rick, what do you think about Marcus Mariota?
Yeah, we've been talking about him for weeks. His ownership just doesn't get over 40% across the board. This week wasn't the best week, but, everybody has a down week. But he has been pretty steady throughout the year without having weeks like this. He's been in the 15 to 17 point range. I expect that to continue, going forward. There are going to be a couple duds in here, but if you're looking to fill a guy in for a bye and just stream quarterbacks, you can always look at him. And he's going to have some games that are going to be favorable for his skill set, running the ball plus throwing the ball. And it's not the prettiest. It's not the prettiest name, as you can see, even though he's had success so far in 2022. His rostership is just not caught up to what he's done throughout the entire season.
Absolutely. Next up is a guy to stash, Deshaun Watson. We know that he's going to be coming back in week 11, so he's just a couple short weeks away, but his roster ownership is extremely low for a guy that can do it on the ground, can do it through the air, has a ton of weapons in Cleveland. We know they've already said he's going to be the starter when he returns. Jacoby Brissett is not taking that role, so you got to get him on your roster if you're looking for some quarterback help as we move towards the fantasy playoffs. What do you think about Watson? How do you feel about him in this offense, Rick?
The truth is we don't really know, right? Because he hasn't played in 2 years almost, and you never know what this whole incident or all the incidents and that whole situation is going to do to somebody's mind and confidence and all of that. Now, he may just be, crazy enough that it doesn't even bother him, but who knows, right? But,
right.
Obviously this offense has weapons. The running game's really good, and Amari Cooper's really good. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been improving even with Brissett. So they've got some options. I think he's going to, at least be a serviceable fantasy option. But if he comes back and is the same guy that he was before everything happened, then you're getting a QB1 and you want to get him this week. You don't want to wait till next week when everybody's going to be targeting him. You want to grab him this week and get him cheaper. And if he comes back like he was before, you're going to have a monster quarterback for the remainder of the season.
Absolutely. All right. Next up is a guy who's been a monster quarterback here recently, Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. I know he's had a kind of rocky start to the season, but he's continuing to improve, and they've improved the players around him. That Claypool addition was a huge get, and this is actually a guy that, Rick, I know you had mentioned either in the Discord community or just in one of these videos that Claypool's a guy you would love to see in Chicago. So how do you feel about Fields moving forward? Are we going to see more of what we saw against Miami the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him running the ball a lot the last 3 games, right? Since the Patriots game, they've been designing a lot of runs for him. And he's probably the second best running quarterback in the league now to Lamar Jackson. And, broke Michael Vick's single game record today with his 178 yards for a regular season game. Obviously, Kaepernick had like 181 in a playoff game against the Packers, which is awesome. He's been putting up fantasy points. I think 4 of his last 5 games, I believe, are over 20 points. Today was just a monster day. Him and Claypool are going to, get better. Kmet's playing a lot better the last few weeks. They're getting him a lot more involved. Darnell Mooney's, getting better as the season goes on. Just the whole offense, the longer they're in this Luke Getsy offense, they just get better. They just look better. 4 straight games rushing over 225 yards for the Bears, and Fields is a big part of that. He's been over, I think, 60 yards the last 4 games. I think, I said it last week, I think he's a top 10 quarterback the rest of the season. And if he keeps running the ball like this and he just looks so good doing it, it's going to be hard to sit him week to week.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, for those of you like me, I put him in a lot of lineups this week just because I saw what Detroit was able to do to Miami's defense. I was like, I have a sneaking suspicion that Fields can get you something, and he blew up this week.
And fun fact, real quick, before we get to Kylin Hill, Justin Fields now has the highest QBR in the division over Aaron Rodgers, over Kirk Cousins, and Jared Goff. So it's been a huge turnaround the past 5 weeks to the opening, weeks of the season. So it's just it just keeps going up. So I'm loving it.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit moving forward. All right, so next up is another stash, a guy that you should probably consider putting on your roster because we know Aaron Jones got hurt in this week's game, and it'll be interesting to see what the news says moving forward about Jones. But even as a guy who is a Lions guy, I watched that entire game, painstakingly watched that entire game that nobody wanted to win, and the running game just didn't look great at times. I mean, so a guy like Kylin Hill, if there is an injury, maybe he brings a jolt to this offense. What are your thoughts on this whole situation in Kylin Hill?
Yeah, this is just a deep one. We have no idea what's going to happen, but, ankle injury for Aaron Jones. If he's going to be out, we know A.J. Dillon is probably going to be a top 16, 18 option the rest of the season if Aaron Jones would be out for an extended period of time. But we also know that Green Bay uses multiple running backs. They don't just use one guy. So Kylin Hill's probably going to get opportunities. It's not a given, but if I'm looking for a deep stash, if something would happen to A.J. Dillon, then Kylin Hill could get a ton of work. So it's kind of, a dart throw, but maybe that offense figures it out the second half of the season and Kylin Hill gets a lot of work if Aaron Jones misses extensive time and you get a nice running back for cheap off your waivers.
There you go. All right, next up, another guy, Zack Moss from the Indianapolis Colts. Sounds weird. He got traded and then was not playing this week in week 9, but looks like, with the Jonathan Taylor up and down all season with injury, they needed somebody else to help shoulder the load. Naheem Hines went to Buffalo, so obviously there's plenty of room for something behind Jonathan Taylor. What's your gut tell you to do with Zack Moss, and what kind of are you expecting the rest of the season for him?
Well, Zack Moss is somebody to protect against JT, right? Or if you don't have JT on your roster, if JT misses extended time, we've seen today, like the running backs for Indianapolis, either hurt or ineffective. They just traded for Zack Moss, even though it looks like a throw-in on that deal with Naeem Hines going the opposite direction. But he could get a ton of work, right? If everybody else is hurt and ineffective and JT misses time, a lot of time the remainder of the season, Zack Moss could end up being the guy. I'm not a big Zack Moss fan, but I will take opportunity. And there's a chance that Zack Moss gets a lot of that over the second half of the season for the Colts.
Definitely potential because we've seen it. Jonathan Taylor's been up and down this year. So Zack Moss is definitely an interesting name to stash. Another running back stash, Kyren Williams. As you can tell here, week 9, none of the running backs really did anything super exciting. So a guy like Williams coming back from injury, maybe he's the boost they need. Maybe he gets an opportunity. What are you thinking here with Williams?
It's just like what we said last week, right? This is no different. Henderson had a decent week by the numbers. I believe it was one big run that made up a lot of that because early in the game, the run game was literally nothing. Henderson hadn't done anything. Akers hadn't did anything. Obviously, they only carried the ball 19 times between the 3 running backs there. They need help in the running game. And next week is the week that they have to make a decision on Kyren Williams being active after, his 21-day window will close after they pulled him off of IR. So next week could be the week that he is active and gets an opportunity. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up getting 15 carries in a game because they just seem to not be in love with anybody that they've got. And none of them have really given you a reason to be in love with him.
Another stash here, Isaiah Spiller. This is an interesting name, a very talented running back coming out of college in a really good position. We like the backup role here because there is some potential value. What's your thoughts on Spiller?
Yeah, so, this is the week where he kind of took over the backup role. Sony Michel only had 1 attempt this week. Isaiah Spiller got up to 7. It wasn't like a big fantasy production week, but we want the guy that's going to get all the touches if something would happen to Eckler. Obviously, Eckler had a big week. If he goes down, it looks like Isaiah Spiller is going to get a ton of work, and we want the running back in that offense that gets a ton of work. So if you have a spot to stash Spiller, I think it could pay off big if something would happen to Eckler.
All right, next up, Rachaad White from the Buccaneers. This is an interesting situation going on in Tampa. I mean, the team's kind of all over the place, and people, I even saw in our Discord chat today, people going, what's going on with Leonard Fournette? Rachaad White looks like a guy they want to get involved more. How do you feel about him moving forward? And do you think he continues to eat into Fournette's work?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to rushing attempts, they're like 50-50 this week, right? 9 for Lenny and 8 for Rachaad. Their running game is putrid right now, and they're going to have to figure something out. I believe Justin Fields has more rushing yards than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do. And that's never good, right? I think the
Right.
Buccaneers were last going into this week in rushing yards, and we continue to see Fournette get less and less work rushing the ball. Rashaad's getting, he had 3 receptions this week. We could end up seeing him work into that role for Lenny. 22 targets on the season as the backup there, with Lenny getting the majority of the time, is a decent indication that if Lenny loses his job or gets hurt, that Rachaad White could just blow up. And you want to get him before Lenny gets hurt if you have a spot to stash. And another running back that is just on the verge. He's just real close to taking over a bigger role in that offense and giving fantasy owners a viable option down the stretch that they can get for nothing off of waiver wire.
All right, next up is a guy that we've been talking about. Now, obviously, we've seen, as you can see here, the ownership numbers are moving up, but we always want the Baltimore Ravens running back. And it looks like, now obviously, this is based up until last week, but it looks like Drake looks the best in this backfield. How do you feel about Drake moving forward? And do you think that we continue to see him take the majority of the valuable fantasy touches here?
Yeah, as long as Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins aren't right, then I think Drake's the guy that's going to get a majority of the work in that backfield. And he's still available in 35%, 30% on Sleeper, 35 on Yahoo, but 60% on ESPN. So if you're playing in ESPN leagues and you need running back depth, I think Drake is a huge one, because I don't know that we're going to see Gus Edwards right for the remainder of the season, especially for the remainder of the fantasy season. You need a running back. Drake could be the guy that you just plug in and start for the rest of the season as a flex option. And running backs in the Ravens offense, we've talked about it a million times, are typically very, very efficient. So even if he's not getting 16 to 18 carries, we've seen him get a bunch of receptions last week. If that continues, Drake could be a huge running back for people down the stretch. And while not available in a ton of Yahoo and Sleeper leagues, he is available in the majority of ESPN leagues. So wanted to make sure to keep this on there for the people in ESPN leagues.
Next, Jeff Wilson, newly acquired running back from the Miami Dolphins. This Dolphins running back room is all over the place, but they do love ex-49ers. That's for sure. With Mostert, with Jeff Wilson. Wilson looked good this week. Was pretty efficient with his opportunities and even gave you a touchdown. What do you expect out of this backfield moving forward? Is it the Jeff Wilson show, or are we going to see kind of a split up situation?
I didn't think that we were going to see Wilson take this much work away from Mostert in the first week. So that's not very good for Mostert owners the remainder of the season. Obviously, this isn't a foreign system for Jeff Wilson, right? He comes straight from the system and gets plugged right into that system, with McDaniel being from the 49ers organization and whatnot. So he knows more than the typical running back that switches teams. So it was easier to get him involved right off the bat.
Absolutely.
But it seems like he is already their preferred option at running back. That offense is just so good. They are very, very good when Tua is under center. So I think Jeff Wilson has a lot of opportunity the rest of the year in a really good offense that could end up being a big fantasy. He's already been a big fantasy option for people for the season since Elijah Mitchell went down. He's already been very good from a fantasy perspective, and he's still available in half a league. So what the hell's going on?
Absolutely. Next up is a stash. Odell Beckham Jr., as you can see on the screen, it looks like he's going to be healthy, going to be back. And there's already rumors of the Cowboys. Rick, how do you feel about Odell in a Cowboys offense?
I mean, I like Odell in any offense, because I'm pretty sure he's going to do what he did last year after he was released by the Browns, and he's going to pick a team that has a chance to make a playoff run. Typically, those teams have a good quarterback and a good offense in today's NFL. So it doesn't really matter to me who he signs with. Obviously, I think being the number 2 in the Cowboys offense would be really good. We saw the Cowboys just look outstanding against the Bears last year. Obviously, the Bears defense is not great, but if Odell gets back and he's healthy, then wherever he goes is going to be a high-powered offense, and he's going to fit in and be a productive player, I think. Obviously, we've heard Bills rumors in the past. We've heard back to the Rams, which I don't know. It looks like that may be shot, and I don't know that I want him in that offense this year like last year, because I'm not sure if Stafford's there. And then obviously the Cowboys, him and Dak would probably be real good together. It would hurt. We've been pumping up Michael Gallup and how we think he's going to be better the second half of the season. So that would kind of hurt that. But we've got weeks till Odell's ready to come back, right? If you can stash him, obviously this is a guy that you have to stash for weeks. If you have an IR spot that you can pick him up and put him on, that's great. If you can drop a Michael Thomas that's going to be out for the rest of the year, or somebody else and that you've got on IR that you've got news on here recently that they're going to be out for the rest of the year, then I think Odell is somebody that you should grab. He's available in the majority of leagues and could be a difference maker down the stretch and in the fantasy playoffs.
Next up, Jahan Dotson. So we're expecting the hope is return next week. In this offense, he's looked pretty solid when given the opportunity, and they need some more help. They need to continue to build up this wide receiver core. This is a bit of a stash for us just because he isn't back yet. But Rick, how do you feel about Dotson if he does return week 10? Is this a guy that you feel comfortable with moving forward?
I mean, we've seen early in his career that he is going to be a red zone threat, and 4 touchdowns early on in his career. I think that you can definitely do worse as a flex start from the wide receiver position when he's healthy. Obviously, they do have multiple wide receivers in that Commanders offense that you can play right now. Curtis Samuel had a good day today. Terry McLaurin's there. But I do think Dotson is the number 2 option when he is healthy, and we just haven't seen him healthy for a while, and it does look like there's a good chance that he'll be back in week 10.
Next up, a guy who's been paying off. If you haven't rostered him these last few weeks, then you're missing out on some touchdown upside. I mean, he's over the last few weeks, he's gotten you some action, and then this week we even see he's getting you a touchdown to go on top of it. I mean, this is just a guy who continues to get you a little bit. He's not been huge, not had a boom week, but it's been consistent production over the last few weeks. And coming out of LSU, this was a guy I was a huge fan of. Rostered him in so many dynasty leagues and just kept sitting on him and kicking myself, and just kept sitting, and now he's producing. We're getting some good production on him. This Panthers offense is doing something. There is some signs of life for these receivers outside of DJ Moore. So how do you feel about Terrace Marshall? Is this a guy, do you think he's kind of a flex option or just a bench guy for now and rotating in for bye weeks? Where are you at with him?
Yeah, I think he's had 15 or 16 targets over the past 2 weeks, which is just something we haven't seen early in his career. Obviously, he was behind DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. With Robbie Anderson getting traded away, it has opened up opportunity for Terrace Marshall. Sometimes guys are just buried, right? And with the way the Panthers offense worked with Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, and DJ Moore, it was all kind of just them.
All those 3.
It wasn't there wasn't a lot for anybody else. We've seen Terrace Marshall emerge since those trades happened. We've seen Tommy Tremble get some action since those guys got traded. So it's opening up opportunities for other people. And if he's going to get 6, 8, 10 targets a week, then he is somebody that can fill in at the flex spot.
All right, so next up is a guy who's been hurt. So this would be more of a stash situation because he has potential. He's listed as questionable for tomorrow night for Monday Night Football, but with Michael Thomas out, with the need of this offense to have some receivers that are of value, I know that Traquan Smith is another name that even I mentioned pre-show, and it's like we just can't trust a guy like that, and Callaway and some of these other guys that'll have a week or 2 here and there, but just not consistent. Landry isn't. Landry's a good receiver. Even early this year, week 1 gave you double-digit production, and then the next few weeks didn't give you a ton and then got hurt. So with Andy Dalton under center, how do you feel about Landry in this Saints offense, Rick?
I just think that him and Olave or however you say his name are going to get all the targets in this offense out of the wide receivers. Landry catches everything that's thrown his way. As you can see, 15 catches on 21 targets. And with Michael Thomas out for the rest of the season, if Landry can get back and stay healthy, I think he is going to be a PPR stud the rest of the season.
I would agree. Next up, Cole Kmet, finally, a guy that we've loved, and I mean loved, because he's such a good tight end, is finally starting to produce and show what he can do. They're targeting him, they're getting him the ball in space and letting him make some things happen. Got you a couple touchdowns this week, and really starting to open up the fantasy production, and we needed it. Tight ends in fantasy this year have been so all over the place. This is your team, so Cole Kmet. Why do we want him the rest of the season?
Listen, we've talked about it when we've talked about Justin Fields. This offense just continues to grow, right? They're in the first year in this offense, and all of them were learning it. And it started out not good at all. And now over the last 3 weeks, they've put up 29 or more points, which is something I don't remember. I don't know if I've ever seen that as a Bears fan. I don't know if I've ever seen them do that 3 weeks in a row. But obviously the last 2 weeks, Cole Kmet did not have a touchdown the entire 2021 season. He did not have a touchdown going into week 8 of this season, and he's got 3 over the past 2 weeks, 6 targets. Obviously, you see he only had 20 targets coming into this week. So they're getting him more involved. And I mean, you know, Chicago likes the narrative of they brought in his buddy Chase Claypool, and it sparked Kmet to be a stud this week. But I just think that it's taken time for this offense to get going. And now they are, you know, scheming more plays for Cole Kmet, especially in the red zone. The 18-yard touchdown was awesome. He's just running hard. Had another first down. He actually got 2 carries today, which is different. So you can see them just being creative with the way that they use him and get him involved. And I think that they're going to continue to do that as this season goes. And if this offense keeps progressing and getting more efficient, Cole Kmet's going to benefit from that and be the option that we all wanted him to be at the beginning of the year.
100% agree. Next up, Isaiah Likely. Now, his team plays tomorrow night, but we know that Mark Andrews is, and I believe he's already out, but Mark Andrews
he is out.
Yep. So Mark Andrews is going to be out. So this is going to be your TU1. I know that people are going to be all over him if they haven't been already. Obviously, you can tell the ownership numbers are still pretty low, all things considered. I mean, when given the opportunity, he's looked really good, and Lamar targets him. And this guy's a wide receiver. He's a bit of a cheat code at tight end because he is a wide receiver, and he's got great speed and agility and can make some things happen. Rick, what do we think about Likely, even with Andrews healthy? And when Andrews isn't healthy, obviously we know what to expect.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure he was still on here, even though he plays tomorrow. We did talk about him last week. So there's not a lot to add on what we talked about last week, what we already knew after his big breakout game in week 8. But he is going to be an option in this offense, even when Mark Andrews is back, I think. I think he made a statement in week 8 that said, you know, Bateman being out and nobody else really stepping up, you can run this dual tight end sets, and me and Mark Andrews can be your guy, Lamar. And I think that's what we're going to see. And if you can grab him before Monday night's game, if if your league is one that has open free agency after the waivers pass and until they play, if you have somebody that's on bye that you can drop and pick up Likely, I think he's going to be a tight end option for the rest of the year. I just think that he is a threat in this offense, and with them missing Rachaad Bateman, they need him to step up, and he's looked the part and could be huge down the stretch, even if you're set at tight end.
Absolutely. All right, Cade Otton from the Buccaneers. This is a guy that, with Cameron Brate down, we expected him to step up, but nobody's picked him up. So this is a guy that you really do need to have on your roster. Obviously, we saw this week getting more involved, becoming that target that Brady needs because he loves to target his tight end, and it showed out well. Got you tight end this week. Looks good in this offense, is physical, is athletic, can do all the things he need to do, and they will continue to gel the rest of the season. So how are you feeling about Otton? I know this offense has been kind of all over the place this year, but where are you at with him?
I mean, this dude led the team in receiving this week, I believe, or Scotty Miller did. I think Otton was second. But who would have guessed going into this week that Scotty Miller and Cade Otton would be the 2 leading receivers for the Buccaneers with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones active, right? So
that's wild.
It's the tight end is a position that Tom Brady loves. He loves to target the tight end. That's why I was so high on Cameron Brate prior to the season. Now, Cade Otton being a rookie, you don't expect rookies to come out and produce, but once he started getting the opportunity, he has been the best tight end in the Buccaneers offense. He looks like he's got a bright future ahead of him. If you're in dynasty leagues and can grab him, I would. I'm glad you talked him up early in the season. I went every league that I was in where he was available. I went and picked him up. It's frustrating because in one of my new dynasty leagues, it's a best ball league, I spent a ton of money on Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, and then a decent amount on Gerald Everett because it's a tight end premium, 1.75 per reception. This week, guess who my only tight end that registered me points in my lineup? Cade Otton, who I picked up off the waivers for nothing after it started, and all that money, literally like 30% of my budget on those guys. Going to waste, right? He's played in my lineup as many times as Kyle Pitts. That's how good he's really been on his good weeks. He's been inconsistent, though. But that's what you expect out of rookie tight ends. But Brait, neck injury, if he's going to be out for a long period of time, then Cade Otton, and even if he comes back, it looks like Cade Otton just might be the preferred receiving option at tight end for Tom Brady. And with the way that offense is struggling, if Cade Otton's going to do what he did today, I think Tom Brady is going to be happy with him, and we are going to see him produce for the second half of the season.
I absolutely agree. And this guy's been a guy I've targeted all year round when I can in Dynasty and redraft. And I do think the second half of the season will be pretty solid for him. He'll be a fun player to watch. Thank you for checking us out. Like, subscribe, hit the notification icon. Go to Discord if you want to talk with us more, and we'll talk to you later.